Thank you very much for having me participate in this very special gathering, Lakavad Yud Aleph Nissen, gathering focusing on the theme of our ultimate mission, and that's to welcome Mashiach. You know, historians like to look at what they call pivotal moments in time. If you want to look at the details of any particular year or decade or century, there are volumes and volumes and volumes of books, articles written about every particular moment in history. Thousands of volumes that can define a century. But then there are those particular events that can be pointed to and shown that that moment changed the direction of the country, or in some cases, the moment that changed the world. And it may be literally one moment, one event, but everything that came after that event was affected by that one pivotal moment. You can call it a spark that ignited a flame that illuminates the entire world. And history moves both in the negative and in the positive by these trigger events. For us as Yidden, we could look at some of these pivotal moments of our history. Lech Lecha is a pivotal moment. Everything that happens after Avram is sent on a journey to start a new nation has changed. Everything is different because of that one pasuk, Lech Lecha. Yosef becoming viceroy over all of Egypt eventually leads to the rest of the family moving down to Mitzrayim, setting the stage for the Galus Mitzrayim, setting the stage for Geulas Mitzrayim, setting the stage for ultimately for the burning bush, for Har Sinai. It begins with one moment. Of course, entering Eretz Yisrael, building of the Beis Hamikdash, nothing is the same after those events. There is no doubt in my mind that any historian, whether they be a Jewish historian or even a secular historian, would have to acknowledge that Yud Aleph Nissen is such a day. The birth of our Rebbe brought about a seismic change in the world and has had an impact on Jewish history, the likes of which has not been seen in thousands of years. The Rebbe revolutionized our world and revolutionized Jewish thinking. He made Moshiach part of our daily lexicon. He made it part of our daily agenda. And he made bringing Moshiach our responsibility. There's been no greater trust placed upon the shoulders of a generation than that which the Nasi Hadar placed upon us. One of the most famous nevuos in all of Tanakh is from the book of Yecheskel, Perik Lamed Zayin. It's read when you have a Shabbos Chalamoid Pesach. It's known as the prophecy of the dry bones. And in this Perik, Hashem lifts Yecheskel and carries him to a valley. And the valley is filled with bones. Mileya Atzmais, many bones. V'hine yaveshis mi'oida, very dried out bones. And Hashem asks Yecheskel ben Adam, can these bones come alive? And Yecheskel responds, Hashem, you alone know. And Hashem commands Yecheskel to prophesy to the bones and tell the bones, Koyamar Hashem, a spirit will enter them, and they will come back to life. And flesh and sinews and skin will grow back on the bones, and life, the spirit, will return to you. So Yecheskel does as he's told, and the Perek continues, and there arose a noise. Behold, a commotion. The bones, they were coming together bone to bone. And Yecheskel says, and I looked and lo v're'isi v'hine aleihem gidim ubosar alu. Sinews were upon them, and then flesh came upon them, and then skin covered them from above. V'ruach ein bahem, but there was still no spirit in them. Hashem says to Yecheskel, prophesy, O son of man, and say to the spirit, so says Hashem, from four sides, come, O spirit, and breathe into these slain ones so that they may live. Yecheskel did as commanded, and the spirit came into them, and they lived and they stood on their feet, an army of people, a very great, large army of people. Hashem says, Son of man, ha'atzmos ha'ela kol beis Yisrael, ha'atzmos ha'ela kol beis Yisrael, these bones are all the house of Israel. Behold, they say, Yofshu atzmaiseinu. They cry out that their bones have become dried up. Avda tikvaseinu. Our hope is lost. Nigzarnu lanu. We're cut off. Therefore, so says Hashem, Poiseach v'halisi eschem mikivreseichem ami ve'evesi eschem al admas Yisrael. I open your graves, Hashem says, and I cause you to come out of your graves as my people, and I will put my spirit into you, and you shall live. And I will set you on your land, the land of Eretz Yisrael. For nearly 2,000 years, the Jewish people have suffered in Golus. A once proud nation, a people that stood at Har Sinai and heard Hashem proclaim, V'yisem li segulo mikol ha'amim, you shall be to me the most beloved treasures of people. Ve'atem tiyu li mamleches kayanim v'gei kadosh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. This treasured people was led away in chains, exile, scattered, living among the nations, a lamb among 70 wolves, persecuted by world powers. We've experienced expulsion after expulsion, attempts to convert us, attempts to assimilate us, attempts to deny us the basic human right of worship. They threw us into ghettos and into gulags and into concentration camps and into gas chambers. That should have been the end of the Jewish story. That should have been its final chapter, because conquest and exile and dissolution were the fate of all other nations. Great empires such as Assyria and Babylonia and Egypt and Rome, when they're defeated, they fade away. They leave only pottery buried beneath the ground, mere remnants of their culture. Once a nation had been plundered, they fade into history books. They become part of museum exhibits. Dry bones remain buried beneath the ground. That's the way it works throughout the world of history. And yet, look at the Jewish people. Look at the Yidden. We're far from buried. We are as alive as ever. We are as strong as ever. We are as influential as ever. And on the very brink of bringing about the end of Golus forever. The Rebe took a generation of orphans, a generation of survivors, and he lifted us out of despair, out of malaise, and he challenged us to join him on a mission to change world Jewry forever, and thereby change humanity and the entire world forever. The Rebbe pointed our attention to Nissim and Niflois that were taking place and that we were living in prophetic times. Those of you that were around in the 50s and the 60s, you saw with your own eyes how Jewish families and whole communities who were exiled from their homeland for thousands of years from all four corners of the world were being airlifted and flown on the wings of eagles to Eretz Yisrael. 50,000 Yidden from Yemen, 120,000 from Iraq, from Libya, from Tunisia, from Morocco, hundreds of thousands, unprecedented in world history. The Rebbe promised publicly before the 6-day war that we're going to see open and revealed miracles. He urged people not to leave Eretz Yisrael, but to stay and be on the front lines of witnessing miracles of biblical proportion. And the world watched with disbelief, with eyes wide open, as Nissim, as miracles unfolded every minute of that war. And for the first time in thousands of years, Yerushalayim and the Kais on the Har HaBayis was back under our control. Miracles the Rebbe was talking about, prophecies. It's a new day for Yidden, the Rebbe was telling us. Those of you that can remember the year 1976, in July of 1976. This country was celebrating its bicentennial, but our focus was on Uganda and the airport in Entebbe. And in one of the most daring rescue missions ever attempted, Israel rescued the Jewish hostages. And the Rebbe went public immediately and called our attention to what just took place and said, Nisim Giluyim. Hashem was showing us open miracles. The era of miracles has returned. We're being prepared for a new era. We just needed to open our eyes. For 70 years, the Soviet Union was under the ruthless leadership of communism. Not only did it deny the freedom and human rights that our country so proudly offers all of its citizens, it denied the most basic of all rights. The right to serve Hashem, the right to worship. Yiddishkeit was outlawed. Teaching Torah was banned. Even teaching Aleph base was a crime. So this massive Soviet empire, spreading over 11 time zones, made war against the Jew, against Yiddishkeit, and left some 5 to 6 million Yidden choked off from the rest of the Jewish world. The Frierdiker Rebbe vowed not to be intimidated by this ruthless government, and he and his Hasidim went underground, and they established secret day schools and adult education and kosher schlachtheises and matzah bakeries and mikvahs. And many of the Hasidim were caught. Hundreds were executed. Thousands were sent into years of slave labor in Siberia. And thousands more continued the battle. In 1927, the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested and sentenced to death for defying the communist government. They felt if they would kill the leader, the movement would die. And through the personal intervention of the President of the United States, and of course, many miracles from the Eibishter's execution was commuted, and he was exiled from Russia. His Hasidim wouldn't give up. And for 70 years, this underground continued. Our Rebbe would not allow a day to pass without thinking about the Jews left behind the Iron Curtain. And he would send emissaries disguised as tourists to smuggle in tefillin and mezuzahs and money, and they would smuggle out information and letters and films. The Rebbe would sit for hours with these emissaries upon their return, and he would ask many questions, and he would read every letter, and he would watch the films, and he would cry bitter tears. These were his brothers and his sisters, some 6 million locked behind the wall. Perhaps some of you watching remember when at a Farbrengen, the Rebbe shared a letter he received from a young Russian boy. The boy writes, "Dear Rebbe, thank you for sending me the siddur that I asked for. However, I'm having difficulty concentrating properly on my tefillos. Please give me a bracha that my prayer should come more naturally. I should be able to concentrate more on my davening." And the Rebbe was reading this letter, he broke down in tears. Here's a boy, bar mitzvah age, and he's not asking for bicycles. He's not asking for toys. He wasn't even asking to get me out of here. Rebbe, what should I do if I can't daven properly? What should I do about my prayers? And the Rebbe cried out, "Ribono shel olam, do you hear this? All he's asking for is the ability to pray to you. Why must his life be so constrained and so restricted and so difficult?" You may remember Lag BaOmer 1980. Thousands of people in attendance. I remember being there, and the Rebbe always spoke in Yiddish at the parades, and Rabbi J.J. Haftal of Hashem would translate into English. And all of a sudden, the Rebbe switches languages on us. He starts speaking in Russian. I didn't understand any Russian. Most of us didn't understand any Russian. As it turns out, the Rebbe was aware that the underground managed to get a live feed of his address. And the Rebbe was speaking directly to his Hasidim in the Soviet Union. And he's telling them to hang on. Don't give up. It's going to end, and it's going to end very soon. The communist leaders were criminals and would soon be treated as criminals by the Soviet Union itself. And they would be replaced with leaders that would allow the Jews religious freedom. We heard this, it sounded like a pipe dream. We witnessed the collapse of what's called the evil empire before our very eyes. A miracle of miracles, as the Rebbe said, not a single shot was fired, no tanks, no guns, no bombings. It just collapsed. If someone would have predicted the defeat of the powerful Soviet communists and the total destruction of the Soviet empire, if someone would have told this to you in the 1970s, you would have imagined it would take World War III. Instead, we witnessed the most miraculous revolution the world has ever known. And as the statue of Stalin came tumbling down, 70 years of communism came to an end overnight. Night after night, another country and another country fell into the hands of freedom. Unprecedented. We watched freedom reign and conquer. We watched the old guard run for their lives. Criminals, the Rebbe called them. Criminals they were. Anywhere from 5 to 6 million Jews found freedom. According to Jewish tradition, there were approximately between 2 and 3 million Yidden that left Mitzrayim. We have been celebrating that event for 3,333 years. Some 5 to 6 million Jews found freedom in our lifetime. Do you begin to understand the magnitude of the events of our lifetime? So says Hashem to Yecheskel, from 4 sides come, O Spirit, and breathe into these dry bones so that they may live. And the Spirit came into them and stood on their feet, an army of people, a very great, large army of people. If you remember the first Hanukkah after the fall of the Soviet Empire, so Chabad headquarters organized a program called Hanukkah Live. Using satellite television, there would be a live menorah kindling all over the world simultaneously. In Rockefeller Center in New York and Washington, D.C., by the Kaisel in France and in Italy and in Hong Kong and in Australia and in London. And for the first time in its history, a public Hanukkah menorah kindling in Moscow, blocks from the Kremlin. Each location will be able to see the other locations kindling at the same time. Now today, because of all technology, this doesn't seem like much to you, but back then this was revolutionary. That we would be able to see Jews in another part of the world lighting a menorah at the exact same time they would be able to see us, all going on all together. If you remember the scene, the Rebbe stood at his place in 770, and he had screens in front of him, and he watched as tens of thousands of Russian Jews came out in the streets of Moscow to celebrate Hanukkah. And they were able to see him live on the big screen television, all for the very first time. How many of you that watched it can hold back the tears? How many boxes of Kleenex did we need to get through that hour? Think, which miracle was greater? The story of Hanukkah, where 1 jug of oil lasted for 8 days, or the story of some 5 to 6 million Jews having the freedom for the first time to celebrate Hanukkah? Today, there are hundreds of Chabad houses all over the old Soviet Empire, not underground, above ground, way above ground, tall buildings. In Russia and in the Ukraine and in Latvia and Lithuania, in Estonia and in Moldova and in Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan. I sound like Rabbi Kitlarski already. Hundreds of day schools and day camps and adult education programs and mikvahs. The dry bones have come back to life. Yiddishkeit is thriving. Hundreds of ancient and historic synagogues that for long had been stolen from the Jewish community has been restored and rebuilt and returned to the Jewish community. The first years after the collapse, 1,000 tons of shmura matzah was sent to the old Soviet Union to have community seders all over. That's 2 million pounds of matzah that was shipped. That's more matzah than the Yidden took out of Mitzrayim the very first time around. Now they have matzah bakeries and they're shipping to us, and Costco's all over our country are selling Ukrainian matzah. You begin to realize the period of time, the miracles that we have gone through. In 1927, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, he was being questioned, and the communists demanded that he turn over the names of all of his followers on the underground. And he refused, of course. And he was beaten, and he was tortured severely. And we all know the story. The interrogating officer, frustrated by the lack of progress, pulls out his revolver, puts it at the Rebbe's head, and he says, "This little toy has made many a stubborn person talk." And the Rebbe responds, "This little toy can only make those who have one life and many gods talk. I have two lives and one God. This toy can hurt me." And he was beaten some more. 75 years exactly to the day, 75 years of his arrest. On May 26, 2002, a couple comes to visit the Chabad synagogue in St. Petersburg, the Chabad house in St. Petersburg. Their names, President George W. Bush and his wife, Laura. The President and First Lady of the United States of America. They were on a tour of Russia, and they decided, let's stop off at the Chabad Center and take a look. And then met by Rabbi and Rebbetzin Pesner. The interpreter is standing by, and Rabbi Pesner begins to speak in a perfect Brooklyn accent. And the president is amazed. And they say, well, we're from Brooklyn. Emissaries of the Lubavitcher Rebbe to spread and teach Yiddishkeit to our millions of brothers and sisters who have been now reunited with the rest of the family. They say that Bush was so moved that he changed his daily schedule, that he and Laura wanted to spend more time together with the Pesners because they wanted to hear more. The president was a religious man. He knew he was looking at the prophecies of Ezekiel. And he was standing right in the middle of the valley of dry bones as it was coming back to life. The Rebbe showed us how to open our eyes, how to believe, how to have emunah, how to have betachan. Remember the Gulf War? Remember the threats made by Saddam Hussein to attack Eretz Yisrael with poisonous gas? And again, so many panicked, and parents were rushing to get plane tickets for the yeshiva bachrim, for seminary students to get out of harm's way and leave Eretz Yisrael. Remember how every Israeli citizen was fitted with a gas mask? The world was in a state of panic. All except for one man, one Navi, who spoke out loud and clear and once again assured us that we will see Nisim Geluyim. Have no fear. Stand strong with your emunah, with your bitachon, and watch as the miracles will unfold. The Rebbe told us that this is just a preparation for Mashiach. He pointed our attention to the Yalkut Shma'ini. Hine Mashiach ba. There's so much to say, but with my limited time remaining, I'd like to propose one more fulfillment of Yecheskel's Nevuah. Let's take a look back at the state of American Jewry post-Holocaust. The after effects of the physical nightmare led to spiritual disillusionment, causing so many of our people to drift away from their heritage, to drift away from Yiddishkeit. You see, this newfound freedom led to a desire to be free from it all. So many, unfortunately, dropped religious life, stopped practicing the ways of their parents, said goodbye to Shabbos and goodbye to kosher and goodbye to shul. New movements began popping up offering watered-down versions. Judaism light, diet Judaism, no calories. And in the place of mitzvahs and traditions, they made clubs and memberships and tea parties. And an innocent generation of Jewish children grew up in the United States denied of their Jewish heritage, denied of the very memories that their parents had of Yiddishkeit when they were growing up, denied the memories of a Bubby and Zaydi's home filled with the rich sense of Jewish life, denied the memories of Kiddush at a Shabbos table, denied kosher and mezuzah and tefillin and yeshiva. You know, it's an interesting phenomenon when you get cut flowers from the florist, right? You get a bouquet of flowers, you get from your husband perhaps on Erev Shabbos, Erev Yantif, and they're beautiful, but they don't last very long. In a few days and they start to wilt away. Even if you put those little aspirins that they give you with it and you put it in the water, they don't last. Now, the very same flower, if it was still attached to its roots, would last a lot longer. But even flowers that are attached to their roots don't necessarily guarantee long-term survival. It has to be in its right climate. So if you plant a particular flower that grows well in California and you put it in Brooklyn, it may not grow well. You take the same seeds and you plant them in the right environment, in its natural environment, they grow, they spread, they flourish. Judaism in America looked like it was going down the path of the cut flowers. It had no roots. It was cut off from its past. It had no traditions to hold dear and sacred. You were a Jew perhaps for a day or two a year. American Jewry was fast becoming a valley of dried bones. Assimilation was rampant. There was a Harvard study that came out that predicted when the last Jew would pass away in America. And cults and Maharishis and missionaries were preying on Jewish souls. Intermarriage reached an all-time high then of 52%. Historians and statisticians will tell you that in order for any ethnic group to survive, you need a minimal birth rate of 2.1 per family. The American Jewish family is at 1.4. And the statisticians of Harvard understood this, and they knew correctly that without the pressure of shtetl life and without the anti-Semitism that forced the Jews to stick together, and without the authority of the rabbi that took place in Europe, and without Jewish practice as part of day-to-day life, Judaism in America didn't stand a chance. Because we were a bunch of cut flowers waiting to wilt away. And if at best we sprinkled a little tradition here, we made a latke on Hanukkah, and we ate a piece of gefilte fish once a year, and then we went to see Fiddler on the roof, these roots were like planting seeds in an unnatural environment, and we were bound to fail. Things looked bleak. The uniqueness of our Rebbe was he didn't see the Jewish world with pessimistic eyes. He saw American Jewry as potentially the greatest fulfillment of Yecheskel's vision. He saw innocent Jews. He saw holy Jews schlepped away from their roots, schlepped away from their heritage, schlepped away from the Torah, not by the tyranny of oppression, but by the magnetic draw of assimilation in the land of the free. And the Rebbe wouldn't allow the destruction of our past to become the destiny of our future. He wouldn't allow Hitler Yamach Shemoy any such victory. And he cried out to us, Ufaratzta. Let us reignite the souls of our brothers and sisters throughout the world. Let's each reach out to them with love. Let's help those in need. Let's build Chabad houses and shuls and schools and outreach centers. Let's go on Mivtzoyim. Let's send our kids from yeshiva on Mivtzoyim every Friday. Let's go out there every corner of every nook and cranny in the world. Back in 1972, as the Rebbe was approaching his 70th birthday, there were some well-meaning disciples who suggested to the Rebbe that now he was getting on in years, perhaps it was time to slow down a bit. You know, stop putting in the long hours and investing so much of your health and well-being into all this growth and expansion, like a semi-retirement. They should have known better. As a matter of fact, in honor of the Rebbe's 70th birthday, the Rebbe let it be known, if you're interested in knowing what I'd like for my birthday present, I would like to have 70 new Chabad institutions. At that time, the number was, it was literally almost doubling the amount of Chabad houses that there were at that time, in a matter of months. And on the eve of that historic birthday at a Farbrengen, the Rebbe was handed a list of over 70 moistes to be opened during the course of that year. The Rebbe was very pleased with his birthday gift. And at that Farbrengen, there was this group of donors from California. And they came to approach the Rebbe with a key to one of the Chabad houses. The Rebbe said to them that you're going to see that this is going to be a pattern. It's going to become like a chain store. Very soon there'll be Chabad houses all over the country and all over the world. And in the decades that follow, the Rebbe would continue to launch initiative after initiative and campaign after campaign and project after project with the message, you must carry the torch forward. We have to educate more children. We have to reach out to more families. We have to touch more lives, wherever they may be and whoever they may be. The Rebbe's prediction on his 70th birthday: chain stores. I checked right before coming on today. Macy's today, chain stores from the most popular ones, there are 544 Macy's in the world today. 544. There is hardly a town or a city or a village where Jews live where there's not a Chabad presence today. 5,000 shluchim serving close to 4,000 communities. Today, Macy's could look at Chabad and say, one day maybe we could be like them. As Rabbi Tulushkin concludes in his book, Rebe, we are bearing witness to the greatest renaissance of Jewish life in history. He doesn't say in a century, he doesn't say in a decade. And Rabbi Tulushkin is a historian. He says in history, it's never happened. Never in our past has it been such. The dry bones have come back to life. We have witnessed this perhaps more than any other generation before us. I want to conclude with this story. A number of years ago, I was asked to speak at a JLI retreat. I believe it was in Virginia. And I had the occasion to attend one of the other speakers that were at that particular retreat. When I wasn't speaking and she was speaking, I was able to go to her talk. And I attended a talk by Mrs. Miriam Swerdlove. I won't say Rebbitzin Swerdlove because I one time said it, Rebbitzin Swerdlove, and the next time she saw me in Crown Heights, she gave me an earful. In Lubavitch, there's only one Rebbitzin. Don't you ever call me Rebbitzin again. So Mrs. Swerdlove, if you're listening, my apologies for the last time. I correct myself this time. You also told me if I dare steal your material, you're going to get me for it. So I'm publicly apologizing again to you for stealing your material, but it was really good. So towards the end of this talk, and as I'm sure you've all heard her talk, they're always fascinating, intriguing, humorous. She pulls you in, but she challenges the audience. And she challenged the audience then with this question. What is the most important Jewish book in the world? A book that no Jewish home should be without. And then she rephrased it, perhaps because of the audience she was speaking to. If your child was leaving home and going off to college, and you're obviously concerned about their Yiddishkeit and will they take it with them, and you can give them one book to take with them, only one. As they're leaving home, going off to start life on their own, what book would it be? And she wanted everyone in the room to give an answer. It wasn't just a few volunteers. She went around the room. Everyone had to give an answer. And so many right away went for the obvious. Chumash, 5 books of Moses. Some went with a Tehillim, some went with a Siddur. Those that were more Hasidic inclined said the Tanya. Those that were more secular said a book by Elie Wiesel, a book by Herman Wouk. I remember someone said Torah Meaningful Life. Everyone had it. It was an open question. I'm listening to them quite mystified. Where is she going with it? What's the one book? You know, they said the right ones, a Chumash, a Siddur, a Tehillim, a Tanya. Okay, where's she going with this? Everyone gives their answer. And Miriam says, they're all good answers, but this is mine. And she holds up a book, a little booklet in her hand, and she says, this is the one. What was she holding in her hand? It was a booklet listing all of the 4,000 Chabad centers located throughout the world. Do you know what this book tells you, she asked? It tells you, and more importantly, it tells your child that's going off to college, that anywhere you go on this earth, you're never alone. Wherever you go in the world, you know there's a home, your home. You have a Jewish home right near you, any place you go on earth. In more than 3,700 years of Jewish history, we have never had a phenomenon like this, where a center of Yiddishkeit exists and is available not only in every country in the world, but in every city, in every community. Stop and think a moment how right she is. It has never happened since Avraham Avinu that there's not a single place on earth that you can go, as far and as distant as it may be, and you will always be near a place you can call home. Hashem says to Yecheskel, and Hashem says to each of us, son of man, these bones are all the house of Israel. Behold, they say, our bones have become dried up. Of the tikvaseinu, our hope is lost. Nigzarnu lanu, we are cut off. Therefore, so says Hashem, Hine ani poiseach es kivrei seichem, ve'eleisi eschem mikivrei seichem ami, ve'evesi eschem al admas Yisrael. I open your graves and I cause you to come out of your graves as my people, and I will put my spirit into you and you shall live. And I will set you on your land, the land of Eretz Yisrael. Ashreinu matev chalkeinu ma'anoyim garaleinu, that we were the fortunate ones to be on the front lines of the most miraculous era of our history. And that we had the schus to hear directly from a Navi, from the Sidarenu. We heard with our own ears and we saw it with our own eyes. All that is left, and left on our shoulders, is to finish the task. That it is happening is for certain, but that we can make it happen a minute sooner is something the Rebe told us over and over, that he left it in our hands. So let us unite in the true unity and achdus. Then every one of us must get involved. And we can. If not, the Rebbe would not have placed this responsibility on our shoulders. Let us shturm, let us proclaim to the world, Hine hu ba, it's now. As Perek Lamed Zayin of Yecheskel concludes, V'avdi David Melach Aleihem, may we be Zeicha, the greatest birthday gift of all. This Yud Aleph Nissen, before Yud Aleph Nissen, the Iketzu V'ranenu Sheichnei offer, that the Rebbe should be reunited with his Hasidim Beguf, and he will lead us take from Mayah to the Geula with the scholars of Moshiach Tzidkenu now, Mamash.
Amen.